festival in an Indian village. The Chikuna form the largest Indian population in the Amazon region, and like all indigenous people there, they are fighting to hold on to what's left of their culture. The Western clothes, jeans, t-shirts and trainers might suggest that they're fighting a losing battle. In the western region of the Amazon basin, near the foothills of the Andes, there are 25,000 Chikuna Indians living in scattered villages. The life of the Chikuna is dominated by the forest. Here, a huge tree trunk has been hollowed out to make a canoe. The heat and smoke from the fire dries out the wood, but when it is warm, it can be stretched from tree shape to canoe shape. The Chikuna were one of the first Indian groups to be contacted by the Portuguese explorers who came to the Amazon area of Brazil in the 16th century. Like many Indian people, their culture has been changed a great deal by contact with the outside world. Some traditions and skills, though, have not been lost, like building dugout canoes. It's been going on in this way for centuries. The canoe will be used by men of the village when they are fishing. The Amazon River system teems with fish. There are more freshwater fish here than all of the rest of the world together, and the Indians know how to catch them. The fisherman uses a line to catch his fish. But he can also use a spear, spotting a fish in the shallows at the edge of the water and spearing it with deadly accuracy. Fish are the main source of protein for the people of Tabatinga. Tabatinga has 25 families, a population of around 150. The village is neat and well ordered. The houses are built from small trees, palm leaves and bark. They're on stilts to keep the insides dry in the rainy season and to keep them cool. They are built around a community building called a maloka. It is here that the Chikuna meet to discuss village matters. The land around the village is divided up into individual plots for each family, but everyone in the community helps with the heavy work of cutting down trees. The timber will be used to build houses, to make canoes and spears, or as firewood. But the real purpose of this bout of tree felling is to clear an area of land of about 3 hectares for growing food. Some of the tree stumps are left in the ground. They'll be difficult to remove and they prevent erosion. It's tradition that the woman of the family which is going to farm the land lights the fire to burn away the waste wood. It will bring good luck, but the burning puts ash into the soil which acts as a fertilizer, providing nutrients for the crops. When those nutrients are used up, the clearing will be abandoned and a new one will be cut in the forest. This is shifting cultivation. The plot looks very untidy. The crops are scattered round tree stumps. They are all mixed up rather than being in distinct beds. But it is efficient and does little damage to the forest. In fact, the land may be farmed again after 30 years. This is the main crop, manioc, a root vegetable that is a central part of their diet. They also grow pineapples, bananas, some corn and beans. Any surplus is sold or traded, usually for clothes. Everyone in the family joins in the work, and from the age of 6 or 7, the children will have their own plot to tend to. The village has come to depend more and more upon gardens like these. The men do still hunt. Once they used bow and arrow or blowpipes to fire darts tipped with poison, but that's something that's been lost from their ways. Nowadays they use a shotgun, obtained like the axes and machetes in a trade from a town along the river. But the cartridges for the guns are expensive. This man is the only one in the village who has any. Even so, he's only got 4, so everyone must count. The hunter is an expert shot. This time his catch is a grey Saki monkey. Kills like this are rare, and the Chikuna depend much more upon the river for food. The Indians can find a use for just about everything in the forest. They know that there is poison in the roots of this vine. They're going to use it to catch fish. Again, this is a communal activity. While one man builds a dam, the others cut a mass of roots. They carry the roots about 1 kilometre upstream. While the boys and girls mash up the roots, one of the women is making a basket that will be needed soon. The mashed up root is swirled around in the water. Meanwhile, the basket's almost finished. The poison will stun the fish in the stream. It paralyses their gills. They can't breathe and they have to come to the surface for air. That's when the Indians can catch them. Or they wait for them to float downstream to the newly built dam. Fish is the main source of protein for the Indians. This catch is a week's supply of food for 2 families. It's not only the vines that are poisonous. Manioc, the main crop from the garden, is also poisonous. The Chikuna know how to get rid of the poison so that the root will be safe to eat. First it's ground up, then it's put into a special basket made from woven palm leaves. The juice is squeezed out. The manioc is cooked in a very large pan over a fire. Manioc is made into a gritty flour called farinha. It is an important source of carbohydrate. So the Indian diet is basic: farina, fish, vegetables and meat if they can get it. And fruit from the trees which have been left standing around the village. The boys are gathering a fruit called inga. It is a long, thin pod with seeds inside. The seeds are wrapped in something that looks and tastes like marshmallow. In many ways, it seems an ideal existence. It's always warm and sunny. The food is plentiful, if limited in variety. There's room to play and be free. The Chukuna work hard, but if there's no work to do, they love to sit and talk and share a joke. But there are pressures on indigenous people throughout Amazonia, not just in terms of outside influences on their cultures and traditions. The lands are constantly under threat from business interests who want to set up cattle ranches or dig for minerals or cut the trees down for valuable timber or just from land speculators. Past decade, more than 500,000 indigenous people have been moved from their traditional lands, often forcibly. There have been many killings. In many places, the outside world is closing in on them. At school in another village just downriver, Chukuna children are learning skills that they will need in the world outside their homelands. They're taught science, mathematics, and the language of Portuguese, which is the main language of Brazil. But they also have lessons in their own language of Chukuna and about Chukuna culture, which is still very strong. Back to the festival. It is taking place in a bigger Chukuna village, an hour by canoe from Tabatinga. The centerpiece of the event is an ancient ritual. There are many like this within other Indian cultures in Brazil. This girl has just reached puberty. To mark the transition from childhood to adulthood, and as a punishment for her sins as a child, every hair on her head is pulled out. She's been given an alcoholic drink to make her drowsy, but it's still incredibly painful. Everyone in the village, boys and girls, has to go through this. The hair soon grows back. To our eyes, it may seem unnecessarily cruel. To the Chukuna, it's a part of their history that they're determined to cling on to. "800 kilometres to the east on the banks of the river Taruma live the Ramundo family. They are caboclos, descendants of Indians, Portuguese settlers and African slaves. Their way of life is quite different. Caboclo people don't live in villages. They own their own plot of land, usually by a river. They are small farmers and spend most of their time working on the plot. Like the Indians, Caboclo people grow their own food, but they also produce a lot of extra fruit and vegetables which they sell to markets. Their farming is more organised. Notice that their crops are grown in straight lines on larger, tidier plots. The Caboclos usually clear an area of forest and plant it. When the soil is exhausted, they enlarge the clearing, leaving the old land as pasture. Eventually, the clearing becomes very large and it is more difficult for the forest to regrow. This is another form of shifting cultivation. It is slash and burn cultivation, and it can cause permanent damage to the forest. For this family, this harvest is of pineapples, inga fruit and sugarcane. Unlike the Chukuna Indians, they keep a few cattle to provide meat and milk for their own use. Caboclo family are much more involved in the local market economy than the Indians. They take their produce to market once a week. The market is in the city of Manaus, 4 hours away by boat, so the river is their lifeline. Being able to trade, sell their produce and buy other goods gives them a different way of life to many of the Indian people in the region. Further east along the river, there are Caboclo people with another lifestyle altogether, a lifestyle not based on the forest. Here, the trees have been cleared. In the basin of the Amazon, the people live on the várzea, the levees and islands of the floodplain of the river. For 6 months of the year, they're surrounded by water. In the dry season, their homes are on land, but during the wet season, the river level rises, and this causes many problems. The farmland is underwater, and they depend on their livestock and fish from the river. Every morning, the men from each family have some hard work to do, cutting down long grass that grows on the flooded meadows of the Amazon plains. It's hard to imagine that in the dry season, this will be farmland. It will be some of the most fertile land in the Amazon basin because of the silt deposited by the river during flood. When the water is high, it's a different sort of harvest. The cattle live in these raised corrals throughout the season of high water levels, and they have to be fed every day. It's back-breaking work. But it's worth it. For this small farmer, a cow is a good investment. It can be kept for food, but it can also be sold if the family needs some money quickly. Also, a cow will continue to grow whatever the weather, whereas crops in the fields depend upon the changes in the river. Fishing is no easier than farming in the wet season. There is much more water in the river because of the rain, so the fish that live there have more room to move. That makes them more difficult to catch. The Caboclo people of the floodplain look to fishing for an income, but only when the river is much lower than this. The season of low water is the season of plenty, when the abundant crops from the farmland and the fish from the rivers provide food to sell in the markets and for storage for winter. The lives of the Caboclo people of Amazonia, like those of the indigenous peoples, are closely linked with their environment: the river, the floodplains, the forest. But those places are changing rapidly under growing pressures of development, so the lives of the people will also change forever.